The sound isn't human. It isn't mechanical. It sounds like the sky itself is being ripped open by giant, serrated claws. November 1944. The HU Ragen Forest. A German grenadier crouches in a frozen foxhole, his breath misting in the freezing air, waiting for the familiar heavy thud of American artillery. He knows artillery. He respects artillery. You can time artillery. But this is something else. A high-pitched, oscillating shriek that starts low and climbs into a banshee wail that vibrates your teeth. Suddenly, the tree line explodes. Not one explosion, not 10 hundreds. The forest floor erupts in a blinding, continuous sheet of flame as 60 high. Explosive warheads slam into the earth in less than 30 seconds. The air pressure alone bursts eardrums. Trees shatter into toothpicks. The ground liquefies. And amidst the smoke, the screaming, and the burning chemical stench of cordite, the German radio operator keys his mic, his voice cracking with genuine, primal terror. He doesn't report tanks. He doesn't report infantry. He reports automatic artillery. He reports witchcraft. He reports that the Americans have lost their minds. He has no idea that the thing killing him isn't a secret weapon developed by top scientists in a lab. It's a bunch of scrap metal welded to a truck by a sergeant who refused to fight fair. Welcome to the Western Front, late 1944. The honeymoon is over. The glorious, sun-drenched liberation parades of Paris are a fading memory, replaced by the freezing, mud-sucking misery of the German border. The Allied advance has stalled. We aren't sprinting across France anymore. We are bashing our heads against the Siegfried Line, a concrete dragon's teeth nightmare that stretches for hundreds of miles. This is the meat grinder. The United States Army, built for mobility and speed, is suddenly stuck in a static, brutal slugging match that looks a lot more like 1917 than 1944. And the mood is bad, it's dark. The optimism has rotted away in the trench foot and the cold rain. Men are tired. They are cold. And they are dying for gains measured in yards, not miles. The standard playbook isn't working. We are throwing Sherman tanks against Panther tanks that can punch through them like wet cardboard. We are sending infantry into forests so dense you can't see the enemy until he's stabbing you. We need something else. Something nasty. Something loud. We need a way to break the deadlock. Enter the improvisers. The tinkerers. The guys who look at a standard issue manual and use it for toilet paper. The U.S. Army in World War II is a strange beast. On paper, it's rigid, bureaucratic, obsessed with logistics and doctrine. But on the ground, it is an army of mechanics, hot rodders, and farm boys who grew up fixing tractors with baling wire and spit. This is the army where innovation doesn't always come from the Pentagon. Sometimes, it comes from a muddy motor pool behind the lines, where a guy with a welding torch and a bad attitude decides he's tired of waiting for the brass to solve his problems. We have to talk about the hedge cutter invention, the Rhino tanks, and a man named Sergeant Curtis G. Cullen Jr. Now, history remembers Cullen mostly for the hedgerow cutters in Normandy, welding German beach obstacles onto the front of tanks to slice through the bocage. That was genius. That saved thousands of lives. But Cullen's spirit, that specific brand of American field expediency, didn't stop in Normandy. It infected the entire armored force. It created a culture where good enough wasn't good enough. You had to be lethal. by the time we hit the German border. That spirit of improvisation is desperate. We are facing pillboxes, concrete bunkers, fortified towns where every cellar is a machine gun nest. Regular artillery is great, sure. But artillery is slow to call in. You need a forward observer. You need coordinates. You need to wait for the shells to travel miles from the rear. What the guys on the pointy end of the spear want, what they crave, is immediate, overwhelming violence. They want to be able to delete a grid square without filling out paperwork. They want firepower they can carry with them, and sitting in the supply depots, ignored and unloved, are crates of 4.5-inch M8 rockets. Aircraft rockets. Things meant to be fired from P-47 Thunderbolts and Typhoons. They are erratic. They are inaccurate. They are dangerous to handle. The ground troops aren't supposed to have them. But in war, supposed to is a suggestion. Imagine the scene. A muddy repair depot near the Belgian border. Rain hammering on canvas tents. The smell of wet wool and diesel. You've got ordnance officers scratching their heads, looking at these crates of rockets, and looking at their Shermans and their M3 half-tracks. The conversation isn't recorded, but you can hear it. Hey, Sarge. These things go boom, right? Why do the flyboys get all the fun? It starts with curiosity. It starts with boredom. It starts with the realization that a P-47 isn't always around when you need it. Why can't we launch these things? The manual says no. The manual says the backblast will kill you. The manual says the accuracy is terrible without the speed of the aircraft to stabilize the fins. The manual is written by guys in Washington who go home to warm beds. The guys in the mud don't care about accuracy. They care about volume. They care about noise. They care about making the Germans keep their heads down. So, the welding torches come out. This is the birth of the Calliope, and its uglier, meaner cousins. The T-34 Calliope is the famous one. 60 tubes mounted on top of a Sherman turret. It looks like a pipe organ from hell. But before the factory-made kits arrive in numbers, there are the field mods. The scrap jobs. The monstrosities built by sergeants who just want to see something burn. They take the M8 rocket tubes, plastic or steel, whatever they can find, and they strap them to whatever moves. Jeeps, 6x6 trucks, and, most crucially, the M3 half-track. The M3 is the workhorse. It's a box on tracks. It's reliable. It can carry a lot of weight. And it has a nice, flat bed in the back, perfect for bolting down a rack of death. This isn't refined engineering. This is Mad Max, with a 1940s filter. They build frames out of angle iron, salvaged from bombed-out factories. They wire the ignition circuits into the truck's battery system. They create firing mechanisms that look like science fair projects gone wrong. There are no safety switches. There are no sophisticated aiming computers. You aim by turning the truck. You elevate by cranking a rusted handle or, in some cases, literally propping the launcher up with wooden blocks. It is crude. It is dangerous. If a stray bullet hits the rocket rack, the whole crew becomes pink mist. But they do it anyway, because they know what's coming. They know they have to cross the Rhine. They know they have to breach the Siegfried Line. And they have decided that if they are going to die, they are going to die loud. The skepticism from the officers is palpable. You can see the captains and majors walking by these contraptions, shaking their heads. It'll never work, they say. You'll blow yourselves up. It's a waste of ammo. Cullen's legacy. That spirit of the mad sergeant is fighting an uphill battle against military conservatism. But the sergeants push back. They run tests in empty fields, firing volleys into hillsides, laughing as the rockets spiral and corkscrew through the air. They see the craters. They hear the scream, and they realize something the officers don't. It doesn't matter if you miss the bunker by 10 yards. If you fire 60 rockets at once, the psychological impact alone is worth more than a direct hit. It's terror. It's the sound of the apocalypse. And they can't wait to unleash it on the Third Reich. The first combat deployments are tentative, experimental units. Small detachments attached to armored divisions like the 2nd, the 3rd, the 7th. They roll up to the front lines, under cover of darkness. These strange-looking vehicles with racks of tubes silhouetted against the moon. The regular tank crews look at them with a mix of pity and fear. "Stay away from us," they say. "You guys are a magnet for trouble." But the rocket crews just grin. They check their wiring. They load the 4.5-inch rockets. Careful not to static, discharge the primers. They wait for the dawn. They are about to introduce the Wehrmacht to a new kind of warfare. A warfare of saturation. A warfare of chaos. And as the sun rises over the gray, shattered landscape of the border, the order comes down the line. Not fire, but let 'em have it. The Siegfried Line. The West Wall. To the Germans, it is an impregnable barrier of steel and concrete. A mythological shield protecting the fatherland. To the Americans, it is a meat grinder made of pillboxes, dragon's teeth, and overlapping fields of fire. By late 1944, the U.S. Army is bleeding against this wall. The standard tactic is brutal infantry advances, gets pinned down by machine gun fire from a bunker. Tanks move up to suppress. Artillery is called. Maybe hours later, the bunker is cracked. Maybe not. It is slow, agonizing work, and the casualties are mounting. The morale is fraying. We need a can opener. And the mad sergeants, with their rocket racks, are about to audition for the role. Let's focus on the weapon itself for a second. The 4.5-inch M8 rocket. It is essentially a 4-pound bag of TNT strapped to a solid fuel motor. It has folding fins that pop out when it leaves the tube. But here's the kicker. It has no spin stabilization in the tube. It's fin stabilized only. That means as soon as it leaves the launcher, it is at the mercy of the wind, the air density, and the slightest imperfection in the fins. It weathercocks into the wind. If there's a stiff breeze, you might aim at a barn and hit the silo next to it, or the field behind it. This inaccuracy is why the brass hated it. The Army loves precision. They love one shot, one kill. This is 60 shots, maybe we hit the zip code. But the crews realize that this flaw is actually a feature. When you fire a barrage of 60 rockets, you don't want them all landing in the same hole. You want a pattern. You want a blanket. You want to cover an area the size of a football field in simultaneous explosions. The first real test comes during the pushes around Aachen and the A-Region forest. The terrain is a nightmare. Dense woods. Hills. The Germans are dug in so deep, you'd need a nuclear weapon to root them out. Conventional artillery is having trouble penetrating the thick canopy. Shells are bursting in the tree tops, which is deadly. But the bunkers are underground. Enter the rocket half-tracks. They are brought up to the line, often dangerously close, within 1,000 yards of the enemy. The crews are exposed. The Halftrack offers protection against small arms, sure, but if a German 88 WWII spots them, they are dead. They are driving a bomb. The firing procedure is intense. The driver positions the vehicle. The commander estimates the range. There are no laser rangefinders here. It looks like about 800 yards, elevate to 15 degrees. The loader connects the firing cables. The crew hunkers down inside the armored cab, squeezing their eyes shut, covering their ears. The commander flips the switch. And then, the world ends. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. The sound is deafening. It's not a bang, it's a continuous, tearing roar. The backblast kicks up a massive cloud of dust and debris, instantly revealing their position to everyone in Germany. But for those few seconds, they are gods of thunder. Downrange, the effect is catastrophic. The rockets don't just explode, they arrive in a swarm. Unlike artillery, which falls rhythmically, boom, boom, boom. Rockets arrive all at once. Time on target, without the math. 60 explosions in 10 seconds. The ground churns. The trees are stripped of branches. And the noise. We have to keep coming back to the noise. German prisoners captured after these barrages are often found in a catatonic state. They aren't wounded. They aren't dead. They are just broken. Their nerves are shot. They describe a sound like tearing canvas, magnified 1,000 times. They describe the air being sucked out of their lungs by the overpressure. They didn't know where to hide because the explosions were everywhere at once. There's a specific engagement near a small village on the way to the Ruhr River. A German strongpoint is holding up an entire battalion, 2 machine gun nests and a suspected anti-tank gun. The infantry can't move. The tanks are stuck in the mud. The call goes back. Send up the Calliopes. A platoon of rocket tanks and improvised half-tracks rumbles forward. They crest a small ridge. The Germans see them. They probably think, what are those odd-looking racks? They find out 3 seconds later. The Americans unleash a ripple fire. Within moments, hundreds of rockets saturate the village. The suppression is total. When the American infantry finally advances, they don't find much resistance. They find Germans wandering around in a daze, bleeding from the ears, weapons dropped on the ground. The position wasn't destroyed by precision, it was overwhelmed by shock. This is where the witchcraft element comes in. The German soldier is disciplined. He trusts his equipment. He trusts his officers. But he is superstitious about technology he doesn't understand. To the average Lanzer, American artillery is terrifying but understandable. This screaming death that comes from nowhere, with no muzzle flash from a heavy gun, no warning whistle. It feels unnatural. Rumors start spreading in the German lines. They talk about automatic artillery. They talk about the screaming mimes, say usually reserved for their own Nebelwerfers, but now applied to this new American horror. The psychological impact is profound. It makes them hesitate. It makes them stay in their holes when they should be manning their guns. But it wasn't all victories and terrified Germans. For the American crews, operating these things was a dance with death. The electrical systems were notoriously finicky. In the damp European winter, moisture would get into the firing circuits. You'd flip the switch, and nothing. Or worse, half the rack fires, and the other half sits there, live and angry. Then you have a hung rocket. a rocket that ignited but got stuck in the tube. Now you have a burning motor fizzing and popping inches above your head. What do? You can't call tech support. Someone, usually the sergeant, has to climb out under fire and kick the damn thing loose, or disconnect the wires. It takes a special kind of courage or madness to wrestle with a live rocket while snipers are taking pot shots at you. And let's not forget the logistics. These rockets are heavy. A Halftrack can carry the launcher, but reloading is a nightmare. You have to hand load each 40-pound rocket into the tubes. It takes time, a long time, during which you are vulnerable. The doctrine quickly evolved: shoot and scoot. Pull up, unleash hell, and get the hell out of there before the German artillery triangulates your smoke trail. It turned the rocket crews into nomads, pirates of the battlefield. They would show up, wreck a grid square, and vanish, leaving the infantry to mop up the mess. They were loved by the riflemen, hated by the supply officers. Rockets take up a lot of truck space and feared by the enemy. As 1944 bleeds into 1945, the improvisation becomes standardization. The T-34 Calliope becomes more common. But the spirit of the Mad Sergeant remains. Crews start customizing their rigs, painting names on the tubes. Hitler's headache, the organ grinder, special delivery. They become possessive of their strange weapons. They start to swagger. They aren't just tank drivers or half-track mechanics anymore. They are the rocket men. And they know that when they pull the trigger, the whole battlefield stops to watch. The Battle of the Bulge, December 1944, the last desperate gamble of the Third Reich. The Germans punch through the Ardennes, catching the Allies completely off guard. Chaos reigns. Units are cut off, communications are severed, and the weather closes in, grounding the Allied Air Force. For the rocket crews, this is the ultimate test. The shoot and scoot tactics they perfected on the border are now a matter of survival. They are no longer the hunters, they are the hunted. In the confusion of the retreat and the subsequent counter-attack, the improvised nature of their weapons becomes their greatest asset. They don't need complex fire control centers. They don't need pre-surveyed firing points. They just need a target and a clear line of sight. Imagine a snowy crossroads near St. Vith. A column of German Panther tanks is advancing, their engines growling in the mist. An American roadblock is about to be overrun. A lone M4 Sherman with a T-34 Calliope rack sits hidden in a barn, engine idling. The crew is freezing. They have 60 rockets loaded. They know their 70 feet WWII main gun will bounce off the front of a Panther. But the rockets are high explosive. They might not penetrate the armor, but 60 explosions on the hull of a tank will strip away the optics, shatter the tracks, concuss the crew, and maybe, just maybe, set the engine on fire. The sergeant watches the lead Panther through a crack in the barn door. He waits. The tension is suffocating. He needs them close. Closer. When the lead Panther is 200 yards away, he doesn't fire the main gun. He flips the toggle for the rockets. The barn explodes. Not from a hit, but from the launch. The roof is blown off by the backblast. 60 rockets scream out of the gloom at point-blank range. The effect on the German column is instant chaos. The lead Panther disappears in a cloud of fire and smoke. It isn't penetrated, but the sheer violence of the impacts blinds it. The driver panics, slews the tank sideways, blocking the road. The infantry riding on the back of the tanks are wiped out. The following tanks halt, their commanders buttoning up, terrified of this sudden, overwhelming volume of fire. They think they've hit a major anti-tank ambush. They retreat. One Sherman with a rack of glorified fireworks has stopped a panzer assault. This is the power of the mad sergeant, philosophy asymmetry, using a cheap, inaccurate weapon to create a disproportionate psychological effect. But the cold brings new problems. The rocket propellant behaves differently in sub-zero temperatures. It burns slower. The rockets don't fly as far. The crews have to relearn their aiming points on the fly. Aim high, they tell each other. The cold makes him drop. It's all guesswork. It's all feel. There are stories of crews using chewing gum and grease pencils on their windshields to create makeshift sights. Put the gum on the church steeple, fire. It sounds ridiculous. It sounds like something out of a cartoon. But in the desperate battles for Bastogne and Elsenborn Ridge, it works. The Germans, expecting a demoralized and broken enemy, are met with walls of fire that seem to come from nowhere. During the Bulge, we also see the darker side of this weapon system, the friendly fire incidents. The rockets are unpredictable. In the confused, fluid front lines of the Ardennes, with American and German units mixed together in the snow, firing a barrage of unguided rockets is a massive gamble. There are accounts of rockets falling short, slamming into American foxholes. The infantry screams into the radios, "Check fire! Check fire! You're killing us!" The rocket crews, miles away or hidden behind a hill, feel the sick dread in their stomachs. This is the cost of improvisation. The cost of using a sledgehammer when you need a scalpel. The crews live with this guilt. They know they are saving lives by suppressing the enemy, but they also know that every time they press that button, they are rolling the dice with their own brothers' lives. As the skies clear and the Allied air power returns, the rocket half-tracks and tanks transition back to the offensive. They are used to blast the Germans out of the towns they captured. And here, the urban combat capability of the rockets shines. A rocket barrage into a town doesn't just knock down walls, it starts fires. It creates rubble. It forces the defenders into the cellars, where they can be bypassed or trapped. The screaming memes become the heralds of the American counterattack. When the Germans hear that distinctive wail, they know the GIs are coming, and they know the GIs are angry. There is a documented account of a prisoner interrogation from January 1945. A veteran German NCO, a man who had fought in Russia, is asked what he fears most. He doesn't say the P-47s. He doesn't say the artillery. He says, the trucks with the organ pipes. In Russia, we had the Katyusha. We called it Stalin's organ. It was terrifying. But you Americans, you put them on tanks. You drive them right up to our faces. It is not war. It is slaughter. This acknowledgement validates everything Kulin and the other innovators fought for. They took a weapon designed for the sky, bolted it to the ground, and terrified the most experienced army in the world. The Bulge ends. The Germans are pushed back. The road to the Rhine is open again. But the rocket crews are exhausted. Their vehicles are battered. The racks are bent and scorched. The wiring is frayed. But they don't stop. They are addicted to the power. They are addicted to the look on the infantrymen's faces when a barrage saves their bacon. They patch up their machines. They steal rockets from unsuspecting supply convoys. They are a brotherhood of the mad, driving their fire-breathing chariots towards the heart of Germany. And the craziest part, they are just getting started. The crossing of the Rhine is coming, and they have some ideas about how to make it loud. February 1945. The Rhineland Campaign. The Allies are pushing towards the last great natural barrier, protecting the heart of Germany, the Rhine River. But before they can cross, they have to clear the West Bank. This means fighting through the Reichswald forest and the fortified towns of the Rhineland. It is muddy, miserable, grinding warfare. The Germans are fighting with the desperation of men defending their own homes. Every farmhouse is a fortress. Every cellar is a bunker. The mad sergeants, rockets are no longer an experiment, they are a necessity. By this point, the psychological warfare aspect is fully integrated into the American doctrine. The rocket launchers aren't just used for destruction. They are used for shock and awe. Before that term even existed. Before an attack, the commanders bring up the Calliopes and the Halftracks. They line them up, wheel to wheel. They wait for dawn. And then, they unleash a serenade. Hundreds of rockets simultaneously. The goal isn't necessarily to kill every German in the town. It's to break their will, to make them keep their heads down, while the infantry crosses the open ground. It works. Time and again. American troops report that after a rocket prep, the Germans surrender in droves, dazed and shaking. Let's talk about the crews again. Who are these guys? They are a mix. Some are trained artillerymen. Some are tankers who volunteered for special duty. Some are just guys who were handy with a wrench and got pulled into the orbit of the rocket platoons. They develop a swagger. They wear non-standard uniforms, captured German flight jackets, tankers' overalls soaked in grease, scarves made from parachute silk. They are the pirates of the armored divisions. They know they are a high-priority target. The Germans hate them. If a rocket crew is captured, they can't expect the same treatment as a regular infantryman. The Germans view the rockets as terror weapons, Terrorflieger. Tactics brought to the ground. This adds an edge to their existence. They fight like men with no exit strategy. One of the most terrifying aspects of the rockets was their signature smoke trails. When a volley fired, it left massive white streaks in the air, pointing directly back to the launcher. It was a giant arrow in the sky saying, WWII. This meant the counter-battery fire was almost immediate. The crews had to develop nerves of steel. Fire. Count to 3 to ensure all rockets have cleared. Throw the vehicle into reverse. Floor it. Behind them, the ground where they just stood erupts in German mortar fire. It became a deadly game of tag. Shoot, scoot, and pray. The drivers of these half-tracks were arguably the best in the army. They had to navigate mud, craters, and debris while driving a vehicle that was top-heavy with a rocket rack, all while being shot at. There's a story from the 7th Armored Division during the drive to the Rhine. A rocket half-track gets stuck in a ditch. The rest of the unit pulls back. The crew is alone. They hear German voices. A patrol is approaching. They have one full rack of rockets left, but the launcher is pointed at the sky at a crazy angle because of the ditch. The sergeant, let's call him Mad Jack, makes a decision. He can't aim at the Germans, but he can aim at the trees above the Germans. He figures the airbursts might scare them off. He hotwires the firing circuit directly to the battery because the switch is broken. Sparks fly. He touches the wire. New H-osh. The rockets scream into the canopy directly overhead. Tree limbs, shrapnel, and burning rocket motors rain down on the German patrol. The Germans, thinking they are being attacked by some new terrifying vertical envelopment weapon, scatter. The crew manages to dig the half-track out and escape. It's pure insanity. It's pure genius. The Witchcraft narrative deepens here. We find diaries of German soldiers. They write about the fire rain. They write about the Americans having automatic mortars. They can't comprehend the volume of fire. German tactical doctrine relies on precision and conservation of ammo. The American approach, sending a wall of explosives at a suspected position, is alien to them. It feels wasteful, arrogant, and overwhelmingly powerful. It reinforces the idea that the American war machine is infinite, that they have so much ammo they can afford to burn a forest just to kill a sniper. This realization, that they can't win a war of attrition, is arguably more damaging to German morale than the shrapnel itself. As they reach the Rhine, the targets change. Now they are firing across the river. They are firing at barges, at ferries, at troop concentrations on the far bank. The range of the 4.5-inch rocket is pushed to its absolute limit, about 4,000 yards. They are lobbing these things on a wing and a prayer. But again, the noise. The sound of rockets skipping off the water or slamming into the opposite bank echoes across the valley. It announces to the German heartland, "We are here, and we brought the thunder." The psychological preparation for the crossing has begun. The Germans on the east bank are not sleeping. They are listening to the wail of the banshees and wondering when the boats will come. This period also sees the peak of the field expedient modifications. Crews start welding armor plates to the cabs of their half-tracks to protect against shell splinters. They add extra storage racks for rockets, so they can fire 2 or 3 volleys without returning to the supply trucks. They are turning their vehicles into land battleships. It's ugly, it's heavy, it voids the warranty. But it keeps them alive. And that's all that matters. The Rhine crossing, March 1945. This is the big one, the final hurdle, Operation Plunder, Operation Varsity. The Allies assemble a massive force to breach the river. It is the largest amphibious operation since D-Day. And the mad sergeants' toys are front and center. The plan calls for a massive artillery preparation to soften up the east bank. But the rocket crews have a special job. They are to provide the drenching fire, the saturation. While the big guns target specific bunkers, the rockets are to target everything else-y. Thousands of rocket tubes are lined up along the west bank. T-34 Calliopes on Shermans. T-27 launchers on trucks. The improvised racks on half-tracks. It is the largest concentration of rocket artillery in history up to that point. The crews are tense. They know that once they open fire, every German gun on the other side will be looking for them. They camouflage their vehicles with nets, branches, even hay. They wait for the signal. The tension is electric. The river flows dark and fast in front of them. When the order comes, it is like the earth splits open. The sheer number of rockets fired in the opening minutes of the Rhine crossing is staggering. Observers describe the sky turning into a sheet of flame. The noise is not a sound. It is a physical pressure that vibrates the chest. On the east bank, the world simply ceases to exist. The ground is churned into a moonscape. Trenches collapse. Bunkers are buried. The German defenders are stunned into insensibility. They have never experienced anything like this. The Katyushas on the Eastern Front were bad, but this is a precise, timed, rolling barrage of rockets coordinated with thousands of artillery guns. It is the culmination of the industrial war. For the rocket crews, it is a moment of vindication. They watch the rockets arc over the river, trailing fire, and slam into the enemy positions. They see the secondary explosions as ammo dumps go up. They feel the heat on their faces. They are no longer the mad sergeants tinkering in the mud. They are the wrath of God. They are the tip of the spear. The infantry, waiting in their assault boats, look up at the trails of fire and cheer. Give 'em hell. It is a symphony of destruction, conducted by men in greasy coveralls. But the crossing isn't a walkover. The Germans fight back. Nebelwerfers scream back across the river. Mortar shells drop among the rocket batteries. Casualties are taken. A half-track takes a direct hit, its load of rockets detonating in a sympathetic explosion that leaves nothing but a smoking crater. The crews don't flinch. They keep loading. They keep firing. They are locked in a duel of deafening noise. The air is thick with smoke, dust, and the smell of burnt propellant. It is hell on earth, but it is their hell. Once the bridgeheads are established, the rocket vehicles are some of the first heavy weapons to cross. They roll across the pontoon bridges, the metal slats clanking under their tracks. They enter the German heartland. Now, the war changes. They are no longer liberating occupied territory. They are conquering the enemy's home. The towns are hostile. The civilians stare with mixture of fear and hatred. The white flags hang from the windows, but the snipers are still in the attics. The rocket crews have to be vigilant. They are driving through a landscape they have destroyed. The psychological impact on the German civilians is also noted. They have heard the propaganda about terror weapons. Seeing these strange, multi-tubed machines up close confirms their fears. They look like something out of a science fiction nightmare. The crews, hardened by months of combat, don't offer much comfort. They stare back, grim-faced, hands on their weapons. They are the conquerors now. The witchcraft has worked. It has broken the spell of Nazi invincibility. As they push deeper into Germany, the resistance becomes sporadic but fanatic. The Volkssturm, old men and boys, are thrown into the fight. The rocket crews find themselves in strange, surreal encounters. Firing a volley of rockets at a roadblock, manned by teenagers with Panzerfausts. It feels like overkill. It feels tragic. But they don't stop. The war has its own momentum now. The goal is the Elbe. The goal is the end. And the rockets are the fastest way to get there. They blast a path through the crumbling Reich, leaving burning towns and shattered illusions in their wake. Inside Germany, April 1945. The end is near, but the dying isn't done. The Wehrmacht is collapsing, dissolving into pockets of fanatical resistance and columns of dejected prisoners. The American armored columns are racing across the country, trying to secure ground before the Russians get there. Trying to end the war. The rocket crews are part of these flying columns. They are moving fast, sometimes too fast. They outrun their supply lines. They run out of rockets. They become effectively, strange-looking machine gun carriers, until the ammo trucks catch up. This phase of the war highlights the versatility of the improvised launchers. In the urban fighting of cities, like Nuremberg and Leipzig, the Calliopes and Halftracks are used as direct fire assault guns. They pull up to a building where SS troops are holding out. They lower the rack to point-blank range. They fire a single rocket through a window. The effect is devastating. The room explodes. The building collapses. It is brutal, efficient house cleaning. The Mad Sergeant's invention proves to be the ultimate urban warfare tool. No need to call an airstrike. No need to wait for a demolition team. Just one rocket, and the problem is solved. There is a specific incident in a small German industrial town. A factory complex is being defended by a remnant of a panzer division. They have a Tiger tank tucked away in an alleyway, ambushing any Sherman that tries to pass. The American commander is frustrated. He calls for the rocket jeep. Yes, a jeep. Someone had welded a pair of aircraft rocket tubes to the roll bar of a Willys jeep. It's suicidal. It's ridiculous. The jeep driver, a corporal with a death wish, races down the street, swerves around the corner, fires the two rockets at the Tiger from 50 yards away, and screeches away. The rockets hit the Tiger's track and suspension. They don't penetrate the heavy armor, but they disable the tank. The crew bails out, stunned by the audacity of the attack. A jeep took out a Tiger. It's the ultimate underdog story, made possible by reckless innovation. But the exhaustion is setting in. The crews are zombie-like. They haven't slept in days. They are fueled by coffee, cigarettes, and adrenaline. The novelty of the rockets has worn off. Now, it's just work. Dirty, loud, dangerous work. They are covered in soot. Their ears ring constantly. Permanent hearing damage is the badge of honor for the rocket men. They start to wonder what happens after the war. What do you do with a skill set that involves launching high explosives from a truck? They are specialized warriors in a war that is rapidly running out of targets. We also see the liberated POW camps and concentration camps. The rocket crews, rolling through the countryside, are some of the first to witness the Holocaust. The shock is profound. It changes them. It hardens them. Any lingering sympathy for the enemy evaporates. When they fire their rockets now, it's not just tactical, it's punitive. It's vengeance. They unleash their volleys with a dark fury, tearing apart the landscape of the regime that created such horrors. The madness of the sergeant takes on a righteous quality. They are burning the cancer out of Europe. The Germans, for their part, are terrified to the end. Even as they surrender, they ask about the Stalin organs. They want to know how they work. They want to know if they are radar-guided. When the American crews show them the crude, welded racks, the manual crank handles, the simple wires, the Germans are incredulous. Das ist alles. Sulla, that is all. They cannot believe they were defeated by such primitive technology. It shatters their belief in German engineering superiority. They were beaten by scrap metal and American ingenuity. As the armies meet the Russians at the Elbe, the firing stops. The silence is deafening. For the first time in months, the air isn't being torn apart by the shriek of rockets. The crews sit on their vehicles, looking at the river, looking at the Russians on the other side, who have their own Katyushas. There is a mutual recognition. a nod between the rocket men of the East and the West. They speak the same language, the language of overwhelming firepower. The war in Europe ends. The mad sergeants, war is over. But the legacy of what they did, the improvisation, the terror, the noise, will echo. They proved that in war, sometimes the best weapon isn't the most accurate one. It's the one that scares the hell out of the other guy. They proved that a couple of guys with a welder and a bad idea can change the course of a battle. The aftermath. May 1945 and beyond. The guns fall silent. The occupation begins. And almost immediately, the mad inventions begin to disappear. The U.S. Army, returning to its peacetime bureaucracy, looks at these improvised contraptions with disdain. They are unauthorized. They are non-standard. They are safety hazards. Orders go out: strip the racks, scrape off the welding, return the vehicles to regulation standards. The T-34 Calliopes are unbolted and thrown into scrap piles. The welded half-track frames are cut apart with torches. The history is being erased, disassembled, and melted down. For the crews, this is a bitter pill. These machines were their homes, their protectors, their swords. Watching them being dismantled feels like a betrayal. They try to save souvenirs. A firing switch, a nameplate, a spent rocket casing. But the Army wants to forget the chaos of the battlefield and return to the neat rows of the parade ground. The mad sergeant mentality is no longer welcome. The innovators are told to button their uniforms, shine their boots, and stop acting like pirates. Sergeant Cullen and men like him go back to being regular NCOs or go home to civilian life. Cullen, the man who gave the tanks their teeth in Normandy and inspired a wave of improvisation, doesn't get a parade for his rocket ideas. He gets a handshake and a train ticket. He goes back to obscurity. The men who operated the Witchcraft half-tracks return to farms and factories. They become mechanics, engineers, fathers. But they carry the sound with them, the shriek of the rockets, the shaking of the earth. They flinch at loud noises. They stare a little too long at fireworks. The official histories are written. They focus on the generals. Patton, Eisenhower, Bradley. They focus on the big arrows on the map. The improvised rocket launchers get a footnote, a mention of field expedient measures. The terror they inflicted, the breakthroughs they enabled, are smoothed over. It wasn't doctrine, so it doesn't fit the narrative of a professional, well-oiled machine. But the men who were there know. The infantrymen who watched a village disintegrate under a rocket barrage know. The Germans who huddled in their cellars, praying to a god they had forsaken, certainly know. However, the legacy survives in the DNA of the U.S. military. The success of the Calliope and the improvised launchers proves the value of volume fire. It leads directly to the development of future rocket artillery systems. The MLRS, Multiple Launch Rocket System of the Cold War. That's the grandchild of the Calliope. The concept of shoot and scoot. That was written in blood by the half-track crews in the HU Regin forest. The idea that a single soldier with a good idea can change tactics, that stays. The spirit of the mad sergeant goes underground, waiting for the next war, the next desperate situation to re-emerge. In the ruins of Germany, amongst the rubble, you could still find the twisted remains of the rocket racks for years. Rusted skeletons of the Witchcraft. Children would play on them, not knowing that these metal frames once unleashed the apocalypse. They were monuments to desperation. To the moment when the rulebook was thrown out the window, and survival was the only law. The Germans called it witchcraft because they couldn't understand it. But it wasn't magic. It was American pragmatism, weaponized. The story of the rocket half-tracks is a reminder that war is not clean. It is not orderly. It is a messy, chaotic struggle where the difference between victory and defeat often comes down to who can adapt faster. Who can be crazier? Who can look at a crate of airplane rockets and a truck and see a way to win? It is a story of human ingenuity in the service of destruction, and it is a story that deserves to be told, loud and clear, over the roar of the engines and the scream of the propellant. As the sun sets on the European theater, the ghosts of the rocket men fade away. But if you listen closely to the history, if you read the letters and the after-action reports, you can still hear it. That low hum rising to a shriek. The sound of the mad sergeant laughing at the impossible. The sound of the witchcraft that broke the Reich. So, where does that leave us? Standing in the quiet of a museum, looking at a pristine, restored Sherman tank. It looks clean. The paint is fresh. It has the white star on the side. But it's missing something. It's missing the rack of dirty, soot-stained tubes bolted to the turret. It's missing the wires taped to the hull. It's missing the soul of the conflict, because the real war wasn't fought by museum pieces. It was fought by the Frankenstein monsters built in the mud. Curtis G. Cullen Jr. and the thousands of nameless mechanics and surgeons who built these weapons didn't do it for glory. They didn't do it to revolutionize warfare. They did it because they wanted to go home. They did it because they had friends dying in the hedgerows and the forests, and they needed a way to stop the killing. They strapped rockets to half-tracks, not because it was a good idea, but because it was the only idea they had left. And it worked. It worked so well that the enemy thought they were fighting sorcerers. This story challenges us to rethink our view of WWII. We like to think of it as the good war, fought with industrial might and moral clarity, but at the tip of the spear, it was a scrapyard brawl. It was dirty. It was loud. It was terrifying. The rocket half-tracks represent the raw, unpolished reality of combat. They represent the moment when technology and desperation collide. They are the ultimate symbol of the American way of war, improvised, overwhelming, and utterly relentless. Think about that German soldier in the foxhole we started with. The one hearing the witchcraft. He wasn't defeated by a better ideology in that moment. He wasn't defeated by superior strategy. He was defeated by a noise that told him his resistance was futile. A noise that told him the Americans were willing to tear the sky apart to get to him. That is the power of the weapon. It attacks the mind as much as the body. We live in an age of precision warfare now. Drones, laser-guided missiles. We talk about surgical strikes. We have sanitized the violence. But looking back at the rocket half-tracks, we are reminded of the blunt trauma of total war. There was nothing surgical about a Calliope barrage. It was a sledgehammer. It was a force of nature. And maybe, just maybe, we need to remember that. Remember the terror. Remember the chaos. Because if we forget how loud and messy war really is, we might be too eager to start the next one. The mad sergeant isn't a myth. He's an archetype. He's the guy who fixes the radio with a gum wrapper. He's the guy who welds armor plate to his door. He's the innovator in the foxhole. And as long as there are wars, there will be men like him, looking at the tools they have, looking at the enemy, and thinking, I can make this louder. I can make this deadlier. So the next time you see a WWII documentary, and you see a clip of rockets trailing smoke, screaming into a German town, don't just see it as stock footage. See the crew inside that shaking steel box. See the sergeant with the crazed grin, holding the wires together. Smell the cordite. Feel the fear. And remember that for a few months in 1944 and 1945, the most terrifying thing on the battlefield wasn't a Tiger tank or a Stuka dive bomber. It was a bunch of Americans with a welding torch and a refusal to lose. It was the witchcraft of the West. And it sounded like the end of the world. And that screaming sound, that wail that froze the blood of the Wehrmacht, that is the sound of history being made, one erratic, inaccurate, terrifying rocket at a time. The mad sergeant was right. The madness worked.